Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. Welcome back to my channel. In the past few videos, I've been focusing on the Sion decks, the Sion Tarot deck and a Sion Sigils deck, which were sent to me from the folks over at Artisan Tarot for review and commentary. And I've done a couple. I've done maybe 2 or 3. And in using the Sion Sigils in particular, it started to make me remember other decks that I have that are similar for their simplicity. Now, as you know, I have a few decks that I really, although I love traditional tarot decks, and that's the basically the soul of this channel is historic tarot, but I also have been known to really like abstract type of tarot decks, you know, that not just abstract where the image is not realistic, but abstract where we have symbols rather than art depicting. And the closest that I have to the Sion Sigils was what I thought was the Fortuna Tarot, which many of you know I love and I use frequently. Another one that I have that is sort of similar but falls probably a little bit more to the realm of abstract art that's not realistic, but you could tell it's a body, that kind of thing. And that is the You Are Magic, a tarot. I can't really even realize, I don't even really know what the name of this deck is, but on the box it says You Are Magic, Soleia, Soleil or Soleia. I can't even tell you where I bought this deck. I have been unable to find this deck since I bought it, which is kind of strange. But at any rate, so the closest I think I have to abstract decks are these other 2 decks. So I thought I'd flip the camera and particularly focus on the Fortuna and the Sion Sigils deck to see if their abstractions have any similarities to one another. And of course, I apologize for the sound of the mowing, but the township has decided to mow the lot across the way, and it'll be hours before they're done. So here we have the card that's typically designated as the Fool card. In the Sion Sigils deck, this is how it's depicted. In the Fortuna deck, this is how it's depicted. So you see that the sigils, or the economy line, or the choice of line to represent a concept, can vary from creator to creator. And if any of us were to create our own tarot decks using sigils, we'd have our own, right? We'd have our own choices of lines. Here it is in the 3rd deck I showed you, where we actually have, a more realistic representation of a human form. But it is on the abstract side. And there are other cards in this particular deck which are abstract, which is why I include it. Here we have the Magician. So here we see like a hand gesture above and below. This deck seems to be more in keeping with Rider-Waite-Smith. This one is also, I think, tends to be in line with Rider-Waite-Smith. To some degree, it's like one of the things that I wish they had done was to have put Justice as 8. This deck does, or the tarot deck, the Sion Tarot deck does put Justice as 8. So I have to presume, and I believe that the sigil was put in the order, the Justice card was also 8 in this deck. Whereas I think both of these decks put Justice as 11. So, but I put them all in order. I put them all in the same order, which is to put Justice as 8, but I speak prematurely. So here we have, again, a more realistic representation with a human form for the Magician. The things that these 2 have in common would be upstretched, one arm here is upstretched, both of these arms are upstretched. But I really respond to the economy of line for both. Now here we have the High Priestess of both. So far, the deck by Soleil is less sigil-like, right? But it gets a little bit more sigil-like as we progress. Oops. What happened to the Empress? I had the Empress out of order. Let me find her. Alrighty, there she is. I found her in the box. So here we have the Empress of the three. Now we see, although this is still a figure that we can recognize, we do see the suggestion like of her hair or her veil forming, you know, the birth canal. And we do see we can identify this as an abstraction of a female form with a crown. The, Fortuna Tarot comes so close to being a pip deck, but they went and put Justice's 11. But it came close. It came pretty close to being just a pip deck, which I would have, if they ever do it again, I would really love for them to make Justice 8. So here we have the Emperor. Great representation. I mean, look at that right away and you know that's the Emperor. This, you can tell that this is the Emperor. Now here we begin to see the more of an abstraction occurring. The first 3 cards, or the first 4 cards, if we count the Fool card, had more, well, the Fool card was like a female form. But we do have like the suggestion that's not a form. Okay, here we have what's designated as the Pope. It's called in this deck the Hierophant because it is based on occultist and Rider-Waite-Smith slant, although they have 8 as Justice, which is kind of curious. On the sigil cards, they're not numbered, however. So here we have the representation for the Pope or the Hierophant. In this corresponding Sion Tarot deck, the Pope is represented in female form as Lilith. So here in the Fortuna deck, the Pope is called the Oracle. And here we have great similarity between the two. I don't know if one deck creator was familiar with the other deck creator, or if they just took the obvious representation of the staff and the keys, and they both decided to use it. Here the rays are above, here the rays are below, which is kind of interesting. Here we have the Lovers. Now, isn't this interesting? It could be a mirror, as is this one. And I didn't make the connection until I compared it to this deck. Isn't that something? When I saw a reflection, I was thinking, I'm not sure. But maybe now this creator was familiar with the Fortuna, the reflection of like loving others. This is the Lover's card, plural here. Loving others as you see yourself, right? Love others, extend to others what you would extend to yourself. And that's how I've always understood this card. And now comparing it with this card, now I understand this card more fully because it seems to have a similar message. And here we have a more traditional back to representational form. Here we have the Chariot. And in all 3, they're, pretty abstract. I mean, we can suggest, understand that those are wheels. I mean, I wouldn't, if I looked at this without knowing the tarot, I wouldn't necessarily say, that's the Chariot. But in the context of tarot, I can recognize that's, I can recognize the parts of this. But all 3 here have quite a different take on abstract expression of the Chariot. Now here, as I mentioned, in the Sion Tarot deck, Justice is number 8. In this deck, it's unnumbered, but I just put it in that order because I like that order. Justice in the Fortuna is 11 as it is in the Soleil. So I just kind of put them in the same order so I would have all three in the same order. Now in these two, again, we have greater similarity because the ingredients are basically the same. We have a scale, we have a sword here. The sword becomes part of the scale. Here, I don't see a sword. So the sword was omitted here, but they focused on the scales. Here, the tarot, the Sion Tarot card corresponding to the Justice card is the, I believe, Joan of Arc. So this is kind of a sigil of Joan of Arc. Her austerity, we call it triumph, although she was burned at the stake. Okay, here we have the Hermit in both. All three, rather. Very interesting. These two seem to be more similar with the choice of an eye, which is kind of curious. I'm still trying to understand what that representation is for the Hermit. It could be the reflective nature of a lantern, although this doesn't really look like a lantern. In some ways, this looks like the bow of a ship, with the, hitting the water. It could look like that. And it can also look like a hot air balloon. But I think it's this that's kind of referencing the lantern of the Hermit, I think. And I've looked in the book, and the book doesn't really get into what the representation is. So I hope you guys enjoy when I compare tarot decks, even if they don't seem to be connected at first. I just really always enjoy looking at tarot decks and comparing them with one another, because you never know what you're going to find. So here we have the Wheel of Fortune described as luck in the sigil, the Sion Sigil deck. Here we have Fortuna referencing, Lady Luck, or just luck in general. And this could be seen in a few ways. It kind of looks like an hourglass, right, of equal measure, so that it's not like luck is running out or anything. It also could be seen as a lemniscate, just a continuum. The more things change, the more they remain the same, perhaps. And then here we're back to abstract form. Oh, we were abstract here too for the Hermit. But, we have the wheel, the wheel, and which is a, feature of the Wheel of Fortune. Obviously, we have it here as well. We don't have it here, but a wheel could be seen as a continuum, as can this shape. Fortitude or courage. Now in this deck, like the Chariot card, I'm still trying to understand the representation of fortitude in this way. It seems like something is protected, like a flower with thorns is either protected under a globe of glass or in a niche in a wall somewhere. And then we have the sun with a continuum above. And then here we have a reference to the lion, which is kind of an obvious connection. And then you see here with strength, they've connected it with Leo above. The Hermit. And so we're back to a recognizable abstraction of somebody hanging here. And these two don't seem to be related. Oh, we do have the sense that something is hanging. It could be an Ankh that's in reverse. So, you know, sigils can be extremely personal, obviously. Now here we have Death, which I love this Death card. Of all the Death cards I think I've ever seen, I think this is probably my favorite. So here we have one that looks like death, right? You wouldn't, even if the death word wasn't written there, you would understand it. You know, these two, it might, you know, erase the words. They might not be easy to recognize what they are, but once you recognize that this represents death, then I can really appreciate what a release that is. And then that says release. But what a release, and what a pleasure to think of to think of death in this way, as just not the end. It's you know, like this word says, release. It's letting go. So I do appreciate that representation. Okay. So here we have the alchemist, temperance. Now in this deck, it's represented as protection. So they have a different perspective on temperance than I might have. Here, it's really clearly being representing like the cycle of water. You know, it rains, it gets evaporated, it goes around. It's a cycle, right? Which is the alchemy of the temperance card. And then here we have something occurring between two jugs that almost look fish-like, but I think it's just the design on the jugs. It almost looks like fish heads with a serpent body connecting them, but I don't know if that's all that went into this. It just might be two jugs that just give me that impression, and just the transference of liquid or matter. I think this is probably one of my favorite temperance cards of all time. I love this one, just like the Death card. There's things about this Fortuna deck that I just love. Now here we have the Devil card, again being represented as a mirror, because in the Lover's card, if it's a mirror, it's like love others as you love yourself. When we get to the Devil card, it's like don't overindulge yourself. Don't love yourself so much that it becomes vanity. Because as I've said a million times, vanity comes before the fall, right? So here we have the Devil, and we have like temptation or whatever, somebody with horns, somebody with a snake, the attributes that we might associate with a devil. But I love how clever this is in connecting it to the Lover card, right? The number 6 card with the number 15 card. I love that. And then we have illusion. You know, don't confuse what you see as being something good when it's not good for you. How many times we indulge in things that we think we want, or we think, you know, or maybe we know it's not good for us, but we can't resist. Transformation. This card has a more popular spin to the Tower card than we see traditionally. It maybe isn't suggesting a collapse or devastation. It's just allowing room for something new. I believe in the tarot, the Sion Tarot, I think it's called liberation. I think that's what it's called. So there's a suggestion of like destroying something so that you can be free to recreate. It's similar, I guess, in a way to the message of the Death card. Here we have the Tower here. Again, this is another one that perhaps is very privately connected to the creator. I don't completely understand the connection. I do see the eye as being, you know, maybe the lightning source or the divine that we see in other tower cards. This could be the, you know, lightning bolts or something, but I don't see the destruction that is typically implied. So I'm not quite sure I get it. I know that we have an astrological symbol there. I think that maybe it's Aries. Please forgive me if I didn't say it right, but you know, I'm not an I'm not into astrology well enough to be able to remember. But if it is Aries, it could suggest aggression. But it would suggest aggression, I think, more than what we see here. So this could be the eye, this could be the energy of the, the divine. And this could be, maybe this is the dissolution of whatever matter was there. It could be, and then it just takes it down to its foundation. But I don't know if that's what was intended. And then here we have a phallic-looking tower. Now here we have the Star card, which, if any of you recognize if this is the the symbol for the constellation Aquarius, I'd love to know. And then we have the continuum again of the lemniscate, right? The stars, the universe is eternal. Well, from our human perspective, it's eternal. And who knows, it could be eternal. It could be reborn a million times. Just because we think that this universe is, 14 billion years old, that could just be this recent incarnation of it. Every 20 billion years, it could dissolve and start all over again. Who knows? And then here we have the simple concept of the star, because remember, the tarot triumph cards were all representing a concept. So simple star tells the story. Here we have the moon, perception. And it would behoove any deck creator, probably, who's creating a moon card, to have some kind of representation of the moon, or some type of celestial event, which they all seem to have, some kind of eclipse going on. Now we have the sun card, represented here as bloom. I love this sun card. And you can clearly understand that this is the sun card with the golden, the golden center and the beautiful rays. And then we have the symbol for the sun. And of course, if you're representing the concept of a sun, you need a sun. The sun has to figure into it, right? Just like the sun, this moon and the star have to figure into those cards. Okay, here we have the Judgment card. And these two cards, we understand that we have the announcement from an angel. Well, we don't see an angel here. Here an angel is suggested with 3 horns and, a message from the divine. Okay. And we have, they look like, they don't even just look like angel wings, but they look like bird wings, at any rate. Here we have the horn. Perhaps that's a reference to the divine. We do have snake-like things. And then we do have a solar, not the sun, but we do have some kind of, planetary notation up there. Now, these sigil cards are based on the tarot deck of the same name. And I think what they did was they took the gesture of the figure in that card. Let me show you, for example. If you're frustrated for me not having shown you the comparison between the sigil card and the corresponding tarot deck, just realize that I did it already in another video. So if you want to catch those comparisons, go back a video or two. So you see what I'm saying? They kind of they based this sigil on the corresponding tarot card of the same name, the Sion Tarot. So they have, whatever this shape is. I don't know if it's a mirror or if it's just some type of hoop or some type of portal. And then we have the individual looking into. They've changed the shape. They put circles at the end. They have the gesture of the foot. It's not exactly a mirror image of but it makes sense to the person who created it, I'm sure. Okay, so. Okay, that's done. And then the final card is the World card. Here it's called Unity, perhaps echoing universe. Here they call it the universe. And here It's the world, which is the traditional name. And they do seem to have, what appears to be a world, the globe, in the hands of whoever. Here we have the universe. Everything that's part of the universe is depicted here. And this creator decided to represent the universe in this way and with that word. Now, the Fortuna deck also has a magnum opus, which is a 23rd card in the Triumph order. And sometimes I forget to take it out of the deck when I do a reading, so sometimes it pops up. And when it does, I just roll with it. If I think of it, I'll take it out because I like to use a traditional tarot deck, but I don't get too concerned about it if it's in there and I forget. As a matter of fact, sometimes instructional cards, or like cards that just have identifying names, like, oh, this is the such and such deck, right? Even if those cards are left in and they come out in a read, I'll read it, I'll interpret it, because I'll say, oh, I'll even interpret that. So I don't get too worried, like a card like this, for example. If I were to leave a card like this in a deck and it popped up, I wouldn't redo the whole read because the universe knows I left it in there, and the powers that be understood that that's how it would pop up. So I would just read it and see if there was a message. I wouldn't really worry about it so much. But I try not to make those kinds of mistakes. Anyway, friends, I hope you enjoyed this video comparing 3 decks that are sort of modernish and with a sigil kind of representation. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, peace, stay well, be brave, and be kind.